ADHD is a real psychological issue. So my question to you is, did you know it? Did you know who had ADHD? And if you did know they had ADHD, how did it affect you? How did it change your conceptualization of their problems? How did it change the way you worked with them? Because if you were looking at them as just like every other client that you get, then you're missing some very important facts about them. Okay. First, let me just tell you, this is my father. That's a picture of him at actually, pretty much the exact age I am right now, getting his bachelor's degree. He was very proud of himself. He had the same kind of ADHD I have. He has inattentive ADHD. Now, my grandfather, who was dead, like 15 years before I was born, he had inattentive ADHD, and I'm sure of it. I probably come from a long line of people with inattentive ADHD. I sometimes like to think of it as Jewish ADHD because we're always walking around with reading something in front of us like this. ADHD is not what it's called. It's simply not. It's not a deficit of attention. It's not hyperactivity. What it really is, especially the inattentive type, is it is a problem in the part of the brain, the unconscious part of the brain, that controls or directs and filtering information. We constantly have to do stuff to filter information every second. Let me just ask you right now to notice how you're feeling in your toe, big toe, right? A second ago you did not know how you felt in your big toe. The information was coming to you, but it was totally unimportant to notice it. Now you've noticed it. Now it was filtered out, now it's not filtered out. Of course, it can get very important to notice how you're feeling in your big toe, as you can see in one next slide. Right? Now everybody notices how they feel in their big toe. But most of the time you don't. Think about driving. When you learned to drive, you had to pay attention constantly. Picture if you had to pay attention the way you started when you first learned to drive. You would go out of your mind. You could not drive. If you had to pay attention to everything the way you had to pay attention when you learned how to drive, you would be completely exhausted by 9 in the morning. And in some ways, that is part of what's wrong with what happens to people with predominantly inattentive ADD. Their filter, their ability to literally know what is important is off. And this has major attention gets drawn to the strongest stimulus. The strongest stimulus, which is what's new, what's loud, what's novel, what's shiny, what's urgent, and what's intrinsically important to them. What's intrinsically interesting to them, not important. What's intrinsically interesting. And then, people with inattentive ADHD have another issue, which is that what's going on inside them comes across as more important, even then a little bit more important than it probably ought to be. It's coming through louder. It's coming through louder and more urgently than the outside world.
God, this is so true.
Yeah.
I can't stand it.
And what you're thinking, not just what you're feeling, but what you're thinking is so strong. You may not be attending to the outer world, which our brains are meant to do this dance of attending to both and integrating both almost all the time. You know lots of people who the outer world is everything, and they're hardly aware of anything going on in here. But people that intend with ADD are like the opposite. And inattentive folks really love ideas. their hyperactivity is in their minds. It's in their minds. And I know this personally very, very well. To be constantly thinking and imagining and feeling, to have brilliant conceptual thoughts going around all the time. Unfortunately, those conceptual thoughts can get very stuck. All those great ideas get stuck because the connection between doing and feeling, thinking and doing is, it's often not there. ADHD, all kinds of ADHD are characterized by what you might call time myopia. Take it back to what I said about the fact that people with ADD are always responding to what's new, what's loud, what's urgent, what's the strongest stimulus. They can't. Their minds are not telling them that the paper that's due in 3 days is what's important to focus on. To focus their energy, to draw all their brain power has to be concentrating on this because this is happening in 3 days. It's not happening. It's not registering. It's not registering. Something else is registering. Now, what this means to people, what this means is that time itself doesn't fully exist in the ADD brain. It's like, 9 months from now does not have there's no felt sense of 9 months from now. There's no felt sense even of 9 days from now. That, if you don't have that felt sense, if you can't register that something you're going to do a week or a month from now is important, well, how do you plan for a trip in the summer? How do you plan your career? Now, this isn't awful. ADD folks are amazing in the now. Can be amazing in the now, especially when they're most engaged. When people with ADD are engaged, they are usually amazing, which is why, my happiest ADD clients have found their way into jobs that demand them to be totally focused in the now. For example, EMT, firefighter, also code writer. Funny enough, in the computer industry, your talent is not in your ability to remember what you have to do a month from now, or you're paid to do something that's real time. It's all about real time. That's fantastic. However, unfortunately, like my writers who are ADD, they struggle because their brains will not kick in until 2 days before the deadline. So the pain of feeling that somebody's going to be angry is something that they avoid, and this is a problem with ADD, is the amount of avoidance that comes with it, because it's really important to understand that the avoidance is coming from an anxiety. Mm-hmm. It's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And the reason is, the very thought of doing it causes anxiety, causes a very uncomfortable feeling. And that starts to avalanche. That really starts to avalanche in a number of areas of life until the ADD person feels constantly like everybody or most people are mad at them, or may think that. I just want to talk about why regular therapy has not worked, why people are being frustrated. Everything that I talked about is a processing disorder. Everything I talk about here has to do with how the mind works. And therapy is based upon the major theories that we've been based upon all these years. It's got to be something that you're that happened to you when you were a kid, or it's, cognitive behavioral, well, it's got to be something we can change the way you're thinking about this. And yes, that's connected to your feelings, but your thinking is the source. Or systems. Well, you forgot the milk. You forgot to get the milk because you're passive aggressive. You forgot to buy the milk because you're resentful of your wife for how many times she asks for things. And not surprisingly, you can even look and see that looks right, because the wife who looks very controlling and directive and kind of pushy, but that's not causing the guy to forget to bring home the milk. It's what's called prospective memory. Prospective memory is the problem. People with ADD have terrible prospective memory. They cannot remember. They have terrible ability to remember something that they've been told to do 4 hours ago. That has to happen at a certain time. I get around this because I have a phone that rings me to tell me when I'm near a supermarket. If I absolutely have to get something. That's the reason. But if you don't know the reason, and you are being in a society that says that the reason has to be unconscious emotional or subconscious emotional drives and forces, you end up feeling bad. Everybody ends up feeling bad. The strongest things that happens in ADHD couples is something pretty simple, a simple cycle. When you don't understand, if you have a spouse who has ADD and you've been asking them to do something, get something done, remember something, and that person promises you all the time and then forgets what they promised, it is humanly natural and understandable for you to start to feel like that your spouse doesn't care. They're doing it because they don't care. If they really cared about you, they would do it. They care about other things, they remember other things. Why is it that they remember other things that they want to do, and it's interesting to them, but not what can you care about? What happens? The spouse says, but I do care. I know I care. I tried to remember. I told myself I was going to remember this time. Well, no, you didn't. You always say that. You always say that you're going to remember, and then you don't. And I don't believe you anymore. You're just unreliable. You don't really care. And this is now we've got a marriage problem. Mm-hmm. Now we've got a real marriage problem, because we've got one person who feels like they are constantly failing and they don't know why, and they got another person who feels lonely, who feels angry too, who feels on a deeper level like they're alone in the world. They can't rely on their partner, and their partner must not really love them. Mm-hmm. It's the only explanation that makes rational sense, because the problem with ADD is that this is why I keep calling it a glitch. I use that because it changes. We all think we're unitary creatures. We all think we're rational. We all think we know what we do and why we do it. What happens though is that and I'm talking for myself, what happens when you do things that don't make sense? Like forget to pick up your kid. And it doesn't make sense because you knew it was important. You knew, but you forgot because something else happened. You're left at a complete loss of who you are, and why you are and what's going on. And the spouse is furious, who's more than furious, who's
And a kid who feels abandoned.
and a kid who feels abandoned.
So
It's
how